atonement, an admission of poor taste, but if you thought that last night's apology from David Letterman to the Palin family would be the end of it, you don't know the Palin family. Our third story on the countdown, Sarah and Todd Palin refuse to take yes for an answer and refuse to accept the empathy of people of all political stripes so they can instead martyr themselves and their daughters on a fake cross of pedophilia. Mr. Letterman devoting an entire segment of The Late Show to the Palin saga, first acknowledging the Palin's outrage over two jokes he told about one of their daughters, then inviting the governor and husband to come on the show, and after reading the Palin statements concerning the offending jokes, he went on to read the very jokes they found offensive in the first place.
I'm telling you, I recognize that these are ugly. Yeah. These are actually ugly. These are borderline, but again, in an act of desperation to get cheap laughs, which is what I've been doing for the last 30 years. These are not jokes made about her 14-year-old daughter. I would never make jokes about raping or having sex of any description with a 14-year-old girl. I mean, look at my record. It has never happened. I don't think it's funny. I would never think it was funny. I wouldn't put it in a joke. Here's where you draw the line. Yes, maybe these are questionable because the girl who actually, excuse me, but was knocked up is now 18 years old. Am I guilty of poor taste? Yes. Did I suggest that it was okay for her 14-year-old daughter to be having promiscuous sex? No.
So, apology accepted? Nah, not so much. Last night, Todd Palin issued this reaction. Nice attempt by Letterman to draw the heat away from himself. However, Willow was the only one at the Yankees game, and the only Palin child included in the photo opportunities with the Giulianis, as was obvious. Regardless of which Palin daughter it was, Bristol, Willow, or Piper, these sexually perverted comments are outside the acceptance of mainstream America. That's Todd's now speaking for mainstream America. In case that message was not clear enough, today Palin spokeswoman Meg Stapleton released a follow-up regarding Letterman's statement about the Palin statement about the offending jokes. The Palins have no intention of providing a ratings boost for David Letterman by appearing on his show. Plus, it would be wise to keep Willow away from David Letterman. We are advised that Mrs. Palin is going to be on the Today Show, so please stay away from the train tracks so when the wreck occurs in the morning, nobody gets hurt besides the principals. Joining us now, Washington editor of The Week magazine, political columnist from Bloomberg News, Margaret Carlson. Margaret, good evening.
Good evening, Keith.
So what I don't get here is this was to me a no-brainer for the Palins. They had everybody going, yeah, you know, that was a little over the line. We feel sorry for you, and that shouldn't have been said. And in 24 hours, they go from victims to opportunists. Why?
You know, there's a worse person in the world somewhere in this story, but it's not David Letterman anymore. Yep. He did more than any late-night comic has ever done in terms of apologies. I went and Googled to see who's apologized. Now, you know, Republicans are used to apologizing to Rush Limbaugh, but late-night comics are not used to apologizing to politicians because if they did, they would be doing it every night. David Letterman did not drag the 14-year-old daughter into this. The Palins dragged the 14-year-old daughter into it. And it was absolutely egregious. And they obviously hunger for this kind of melodrama, these family feud type things, because they could have let it rest, and they didn't. In fact, they escalated to calling David Letterman perverted and saying they had to keep their daughter away from him.
That amazed. And the other thing that amazes me on this here is we never learn lessons from history, and clearly Sarah Palin didn't. I mean, assuming we have not heard the last of this, it just doesn't go away, and the Today Show appearance tomorrow suggests it won't, unless she cancels it. Does she have no idea what happened to that guy she used to know, McCain, I think his name was, when he overplayed his hand with Letterman last year? September 24th, not that anybody keeps records or anything of the exact date or who replaced him when he canceled out on Letterman?
Right. I mean, it's a classic thing to go on the show and have your moment where, you know, you all come back together again. Can't we all get along? Hugh Grant did it. President Bill Clinton did it when he, after that disastrous, appearance, he came back and played his saxophone. I think it was for Jay Leno. I'm not sure who it was. And John McCain, a kind of a classic thing. I mean, the Palins really, you know, the zone of privacy around the children stops at a certain point, and the point it stops is when you take your child out of the zone of privacy. And that ended for the Palins when Bristol was paraded on stage at the convention with her now estranged fiancé, as if they were Charles and Diana from the Klondike, to be celebrated. And then they sent her out. This is the worst of all. I mean, sent her out like, you know, a member of a vaudeville troupe to preach abstinence, a subject about which you are likely to get some jokes, especially that abstinence tour is sponsored by Candies, which you probably don't know, Keith, is a clothing line that is aimed at tweens to have them dressed very suggestively.
It is a train wreck, and just as another plug, it'll be on the Today Show in the morning unless she cancels. The Charles and Diana of the Klondike. I love it. Margaret Carlson of Bloomberg News and The Week magazine. Great, thanks,
Good
Margaret.
night, Keith.
First time for Countdown's number 2 story. Tonight's worst persons in the world. The bronze to Liz Cheney in an argument over the closing of Gitmo with Salon's Joan Walsh, who is different than Liz in that she tells the truth. Joan reminds Liz that in June 2006, President Bush, quoting Joan, gave a speech where he said he would close it, Gitmo, and he would bring people home and try them here. Ms. Cheney dismissed Ms. Walsh. No, I'm sorry, he did not say he would bring terrorists onto the homeland. Joan, no, he didn't say that. President Bush, news conference at the U.S.-European Union Summit, June 2006, called for the closing of Gitmo and said he'd send some of the detainees back to their home countries, but added, and we're quoting Liz Cheney's dad's boss, or assistant, there are some who need to be tried in U.S. courts. They're cold-blooded killers. They will murder somebody if they're let out on the street, and yet we believe there ought to be a way forward in a court of law. U.S. courts in the U.S. Liz Cheney, wrong. The apple, as they say, did not fall far from the tree, and when it fell, it discharged, striking Harry Whittington. The runner-up, Coultergeist, had an echo chamber moment with a lunatic fringe radio host over David Letterman's jokes about Sarah Palin's daughters. The host said, but when you go after kids the way he did here, this is a young girl we're talking about. When you go after a woman this way, and Coultergeist actually said, well, and it's not just right. And people didn't go after Chelsea Clinton, and they have not gone after Sasha and Malia, and Annie, and John McCain at a 1998 dinner reportedly told a joke about Chelsea Clinton, which ended with, because her father is Janet Reno. He never denied that he told that joke. Rush Limbaugh, 6 years earlier, when Chelsea Clinton was younger then than the younger Palin daughter is now. So long ago, Limbaugh still had a TV show. He put up a picture of Socks, the Clintons' cat, and he asked, did you know there's a White House dog? And then he put up a picture of Chelsea Clinton. And to use the vulgarities of the gutter, you are a worthless Coulter. But our winner, Reverend Jeremiah Wright, speaking to a reporter from the Daily Press newspaper of Newport News Tuesday night after a sermon at the 95th annual Hampton University Ministers Conference, asked if he had talked to the president. He said no. Now, the newspaper claims he began his answer with the phrase, them Jews ain't gonna let him talk to me, quotes him as such in the newspaper. That is during some crosstalk with the reporter. I think it's right, but later, whatever he actually said there, the context becomes appallingly clear.
Have you spoken with him since he's been in the White House?
You ain't gonna let him talk to me. I told my baby daughter, I said, he'll talk to me 5 years from now when he's lamed up, or 8 years when he's out of office. He's a politician, I'm a pastor. He got to do what politicians do. And the Jewish vote, the AIPAC vote, that's controlling him, that will not let him send a representation to the Darfur Review Conference, that's talking this craziness in Israel because they're Zionists. They will not let him talk to somebody who calls the spade what it is. Ethnic cleansing that's going on in Gaza, the ethnic cleansing of the Zionists is a sin and a crime against humanity.
Reverend Wright now says he misspoke. Quote, I'm not talking about all Jews, all people of the Jewish faith. I'm talking about Zionists, unquote. Mr. Wright, turn in your collar, give your Bible to somebody who's read it, clean out your desk. If it were not true earlier, it is now. You are no longer, by the stretch of anybody's imagination, a man of God. Jeremiah Wright, today's worst person in the world.